So I'm Hunter Smith. I started my career at N.I. I worked as doing LabVIEW phone support and then did K-12 engineering where I got to work on things like Lego robotics and First Robotics and Lego Mindstorms and MyDAC. I got to do an experimental project called Waterloo Labs with the one, the only Mr. Will Schottler over there, one of our elite co-founders, where we got to do wacky LabVIEW projects like driving a car with an iPhone. In the last year, I became a LabVIEW champion. I was excited to join those ranks. And then for the last, I spent nearly 7 years at SpaceX working on LabVIEW for rocket engine test and for launch. And then for the last almost 4 years, I've been at JKI, where I get to work on a lot of fun LabVIEW code for a lot of different applications. Later this afternoon in my 7x7, I'll talk a little bit more about security. But for now, I want to talk to you about errors. I love good LabVIEW errors. Who here loves good LabVIEW errors and put some craft and some thought into them? So I'd much rather get an error that says this key, channel 1, was not found. Available keys, channel 1, channel 2, channel 3. It's very actionable. It saves me a support call. But it takes some crafting to make it. And I make errors like this a lot. One of the things I do a lot is use the 1D array to delimited string function to make my array into a nice comma-separated list. Now, who knows what the default separator is on 1D array to delimited string? Anybody? Which is the least, it's never what I want. It's never what I want. So I made a sub-VI. I made a little sub-VI. It's nice and small. All it's doing is calling 1D array, but it sets a comma space as the default delimiter. And now I've saved myself a little bit of space and made something, a reuse function that I can use over and over again. Now I may also do the same for the error. I don't want to use the create error and have to wire in the custom error code because the default error code there is 0, and that's not helpful. And I generally want to include the call chain, so I want to set that. So now I've made a little function there. And then you'll notice I have map to keys. Now who here has been having a small stroke because that iteration terminal is slightly overlapping the wire? Phew, I see you. But we can also make that a nice little Vim in this case. We're using a malleable VI. And now we can take that same code and make it a little smaller. Now, I was discussing this with Tom, and he said, we want small code, but we don't want dense code. The goal isn't to, let's see how many pixels we can cram in. And so if something like this excites you, then this presentation is going to be fun. If this seems trivial and dumb, then maybe not as fun, but you'll find out this is really a secret presentation in disguise. So there's a word for things like this, for small cosmetic changes you make to code that maybe make it more readable or smaller or more compact, and that's the term syntactic sugar. How many people have heard of this term before? Good amount, all right. We'll call it half. So yeah, syntactic sugar is when we're going to sweeten our syntax a little bit by making it more compact, more readable, and more common. So some examples from text-based languages, we may have A equals A plus 1, and most of us know about the plus equals or minus equals operators, where now we can kind of smush those two things together and save ourselves one character. Then there are some things that just start to feel like the language. Like in C, when you're referencing an array, really what you want to do is get the pointer to where the array is plus an offset of 3. But we all like using array bracket 3 because that's a lot more readable. Then I think the most famous syntax, syntactic sugar, is the ternary operator, that little question mark operator where you can say, you can either do an if, else, or you can do lots of things. But if you really just want to select between two values, you can do the state equals condition, and then value if true, colon value if false. Now, you guys know what, we have a ternary operator in LabVIEW, right? Select, whoa. So I'm proposing that we make some more syntactic sugar for LabVIEW so that we can make code that is smaller, cleaner, more readable, and a little bit sweeter. Does this sound interesting? We want to explore? All right, I got a heck yeah from Nora. That lifts me up. All right, let's talk about G-Sugar. So I've created a palette of syntactic sugar functions, just a handful today. They're all going to be open source. They're all on GitHub right now. And we're going to take a look at them. So first of all, what makes a good toolkit? there's toolkits that we all commonly use, maybe things like OpenG, or I'm a big fan of Karaya unit tests. What makes a good toolkit that you want to download that becomes part of your de facto setup when you're setting up a new machine? And I think you want something that's easy to use. It has really good naming, so the functions are easy to find. You remember what they're called. You don't have to do that like hopeless browse function. If I know the name, then I can quick drop it. I want good icons for my reuse stuff. I want it to be, I want it to save me space on my diagram. I want it to make common decisions for me. I want it to be stable. I don't want you changing the connector pane all the time. And I want it to be lightweight. I don't want to have to, if I want to use that one array function, I now have to install something giant. So for GSugar, here's my scope. Here's what I want to try to create. One, I want this to be core LabVIEW only. And so we're not going to pull in any external dependencies. This isn't a toolkit that adds a driver capability or has a DLL. This is just core LabVIEW. I don't want any external dependencies. I want the source to be in 2020 so that we can use all future versions. I want everything to be OS agnostic so that we're not using any Windows specific things. I think one of the most important things to make something general purpose is to make it low opinion. I don't want it making decisions for you that you have no control over, because that limits how it can be used in different contexts. And we'll talk more about low opinion in a little bit. And lastly, I want common high-use functions. I don't want to create a syntactic sugar function that I'm ever going to use once. I want to optimize that time input versus time output curve that Darren was talking about so that we can make syntactic sugar that's going to save us time often. All right, a few of my design parameters that I think about. Naming conventions. I'm a big fan of noun.verb naming, and so that means name.get or file.read. That's a convention I use. I generally don't put white space in my names, and I use all lowercase for my names. I know that's not everyone's cup of tea. That's what I did here. If you don't like it, you'll have a chance to voice. I always turn off automatic error handling. I always separate my compiled code. Everything you'll see here will use the NXG fuse controls, the more modern than modern controls. And then I'm a big fan of diagram striping, and I'll show you what that is. All right, last setup slide here, and then we'll look at some code. All right, so my goal with GSugar is I want to make a great toolkit. I want to make something that makes development faster, because now some of these common patterns and maybe some things I wouldn't have done before, I wouldn't have made that error as good, but now that it's a little bit easier, I can make it easier. I want it to be fast. I want it to be readable. I always want to be readabling, as Mr. Tiger once said. And so I want it to be readable, and I want it to be consistent. We'll see that when you have to rewrite this code every time, sometimes you don't do it right. And so when you can reuse common code that's well tested, you can protect from that. Now, GSugar is not about optimizing performance. There are some cases that we'll look at where we're actually adding an extra for loop, where without GSugar you can do it with one for loop, but with GSugar you're using two. And sometimes that just doesn't matter. If I'm talking about iterating over a loop of 100 elements, it doesn't really matter if it's one for loop or two. As Tom was saying, we sometimes forget how fast LabVIEW can be for simple things. Now, obviously there are times when you don't want to hit two for loops. That's not where to use GSugar. All right, here's the initial proposed set for GSugar. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to do the largest LabVIEW code review ever, with the most qualified audience ever, to make the best toolkit ever, right? You guys game? All right, so here's what's in scope. Here's what I want your feedback on. Naming, all of the different names. One in particular that's important for a good toolkit is the VI name that's set separately from the file name, the one you set in tools or in VI properties, because that's the name that QuickDrop uses to find it, and we obviously want to make these QuickDrop friendly. We're going to look at VI descriptions, execution settings, orientation of the connector pane, especially with these small icons. Getting that connector pane right makes something a lot more usable. I want feedback on the icon. Of course, the code itself. You'll see that the code we're looking at is going to be diabolically simple enough that we can completely review this scope within this chat. I also want to look at the utility. If you're like, I don't think that's a useful function, or actually there's a primitive that does that, or I know some of these are implemented in other toolkits. These aren't all completely original. And then performance isn't our top priority here, but if I can do the exact same thing and you know of a faster way to do it, I want to hear it. I've gone ahead and uploaded everything to my GitHub. So if you have a laptop out, you're more than welcome to go to this GitHub right now, hunterjki/gsugar. If you go to the pull request tab, there is the full code review. All the slides I'm about to show you are on there. If you want to add comments there, today, later, you're welcome to. Everything we're talking about is MIT licensed, so this is all open source. You can go download all these VIs right now. And then there is a specific place for ideas. All right, last step before we dive in. Review guidelines. So normally you don't do code reviews with 100 people. I don't know how you guys normally do it. We're going to raise our hands. I'll call on you. We'll use the great mics that we have. I want you to talk about things that are good and bad. I think it's easy in a code review to only focus on the bad. I want you to talk about things you like. Keep it short, no soliloquies. I'll play you off. And I may call for votes by hand if we want to get input. I like to think of review feedback into 3 categories. You have nice. I think it's important in a review to call out things you like. That reinforces with you and the reviewer and the developer. You're mutually saying, yes, we're going to do more of this in the future. One of my favorite terms is nit, for a nitpick. And that's in a pull request. I'm going to say, you named it file.read, or you named it file read. I prefer file.read. It's a nitpick. And by declaring it a nit, I'm declaring that you can dismiss it without, I'm not going to block the pull request. And if you say, no thanks, that's a nit, that is an okay response to a nit. I'm going to throw out my assertion. I may say, yeah, that's great. I agree with your nit. I'm going to do that. But if you're declaring it a nit, you're saying this isn't important, this isn't the hill I'm going to die on, but it's just something you may want to consider. And it's a really useful tool in pull requests. If you make every hill the hill that you're going to die on, it makes it hard. Now, there need to be blockers. There need to be like, there's a fundamental flaw here. This is horribly performant. You know, and then it is up to the developer and the reviewer of like, is a typo a blocker? Block diagram typo, maybe? All right, here's how it's going to work. So first, I'm going to just go through all the VIs. We're going to look at 14 VIs on 13 slides. I'm going to go pretty quick. And I want you guys to take notes. So if you have paper, if you don't have one of the GDevCon pads and pens, raise your hand. Mr. Tom McClellan has a few extras he can bring by if anyone needs one. All right, Tom's going to be busy. I gave him a stack. But yeah, I would love for you to make notes. Again, think about nice, nits, and blockers. What we'll do is we'll go through all the VIs, and then we'll go back and decide as a group which VIs we want to focus on and give everyone a chance to speak up. Sound good? All right. You ready to get started? All right. Notice I do have numbers. You can write down the names, or you can write down the numbers if you want to do it. I have a few questions. All right, you're raising your hands for pads. All right, so the first one, string array to list. This is the one we looked at earlier. You can see this is a frustratingly simple VI. It is calling one primitive, or one node from LabVIEW with a different default value than the normal. Now, I like this VI because I think making the icon smaller and making the default value useful is nice for me. The yellow box on all these slides will show the execution settings. Almost everything in here is inlined. Some of them are VIMs, some of them are not. This one's not. So yeah, without sugar, you just have that bigger node. Sometimes that's really cumbersome. With sugar, it's now inlined. The VI is small enough that now if I need to call it on multiple successive items in a format to string, I can do it. Comma space is the most common one I use. The other one I use is this new line. And I use this one because this character, the down arrow, it's not called a new line. That's called a, I'm using Tom's trick because I don't remember. Line feed. Because line feed is the same as when you're typing in a string constant and hit enter. That's a line feed. And so I generally use line feed to format a nice message, and now it all has consistent end characters. You can see the icon's nice and slim there. The delimiter is not required. The string array input is. And then, yeah, just for context, there's what the 1D array to delimited string looks like. All right, moving on. Make your notes. All right, next up is basically the same function, but we've made a Vim version. So now we have a conditional disable structure. How many of you know about Vims? So Vims are malleable VIs where at edit time, the sub-VI will change its behavior based on the wire types that we connect. And in this case, using this conditional disable structure, if it's a string array, it'll just pass through and work just like the previous method. If it's anything other than a string array, it will automatically call this format to string with default. And you can see for something like an enum, we can use the shipping primitive enum to array of enums, and then now use this new vim to convert those enums to a comma delimited array or string. There's a lot of, you can put numbers in there, you can put booleans in there. The default format to string will give you something. It's not necessarily the prettiest thing. I use this a lot for enums. I use this a lot for values. Now, originally I only made the vim version, but because vims are sometimes scary, for reasons that Darren's talked about, for reasons that others have talked about, I also have the hard-coded string version that we looked at number 1. So this one is a vim, but basically has the same connector pane as the previous one. You'll notice that the icons I'm using are white. By convention, when you make a toolkit, you pick a light pastel color. OpenG has green, MGI has blue, primitives are yellow. At first, I was going with like a light pink, and then I'm like, you know what? These are sugar. I'm going with white. So all the VIs are white, unless they're vims, in which case they're vim colored, as per the convention. All right, number 3, string pluralizer. That's a mouthful. So this is just a nice little helper where I'm going to have a string that may need a conditional suffix. It irks me when I see a message that says, your one files was found. Or conversely, 0 file were found. And you're like, ah. Because you don't think about that 0 needs the plural. So you'll notice here for the default case, 1, you just get the string. And if it's 0 or more than 1, basically any number other than 1, you'll get the plural. Now this version supports, again, it's a vim because you can either wire in an array, a set, or an integer. And so if you already have the size in an integer somewhere, you can wire it in, or you could wire in the set directly. Now, I was reviewing this with Tom, and he suggested I add another input for the singular suffix for the case of words like properties, where I need a singular suffix separate from my plural suffix. I do allow you to set the plural suffix for ES cases, but I find this helpful, and now I can get nice messages that say, you found 1 file in 3 directories, or in 3 folders. So I tried to add in the optional singular suffix, but the size of the icon, I was having a hard time. So if you have feedback on that, let me know. All right, we're moving our way. Next is error.createCustom. So for a long time, my default error was the error ring. Who here prefers error ring? That's your default error. Who here just uses the primitive create cluster or error from cluster? Who here uses like something else? OpenG, a few others? So I was a big fan of the error ring because of the built-in format to string. There are some dangers with it being an X node. But the reason I've shied away from it now is because it breaks Control-F searchability. So now if you want to Control-F and find it, that string doesn't show up. And so I've defaulted to using this new one, error.createCustom. It's designed to be really short, so it fits under your train tracks. Notice that there are no required inputs. By default, if you drop this with no inputs, you get a call chain and a custom error code 5000. That is enough to be useful. Custom error at this VI. That's something. That's a breadcrumb I can go explore. I want to be more helpful. I'm going to add a string. I want to be more helpful. I can add a custom error code. I can turn on or off the call chain. And this has a built-in enable. Enable is true by default, so that if I just drop it down, it works normally. But now when I have to do conditional logic, which often when I'm creating errors, I need to do conditional logic, I can do that. Now, this example here shows a great use case for why this can make more consistent code. You have to read that. You have to spend some time, like, okay, if empty string is true, and you have to kind of deconstruct it. Whereas if you get used to using the sub-VI, the sugar function, you can see it can be a lot more consistent, and you'll never get that backwards by accident. I've definitely wired the select backwards on accident and had a surprise. Note that I put the enable input on top, but in the with sugar example, I've pulled that wire down to the bottom. I think that's okay. I didn't want to wire it over the top, and because there's no terminals on bottom, I can do that. All right, error.addInfo. This is where we're going to take an existing error, a non-zero error, and we're going to inject a string. This is especially useful if I have a bunch of different errors. I have 6 different errors that can occur, but they're all on the same device, and I want to add a string that says on device 2. So now this can take an existing error. If it's anything other than the default, including warnings, and if your string is blank, because there are cases where I call this and I don't know the device name, so I don't want to append anything. If both of those are true, we find the call chain by regex and then inject it in between. You can see here it adds that string between a set of new lines so that we get a nice formatted error. And for sugar-free, I found that if you just generally don't do this, because it either meant I had to go wire that device into 6 different errors, which I don't want to do that. It takes time. And so I found this is really helpful, this error info. And once you get used to it, quick drop it. You pick your error wire, dot add info, control I for insert it into the wire, add a string, super easy. Yeah, pre-allocated inlined, not in them. All right, array dot same size. How many times do you have code that uses 2 arrays into a for loop and you don't check the size? Sometimes, when I'm feeling lazy. And that can have catastrophic silent failures, where now if I have an array of 10 and an array of 2, I'm only going to get 2 out. And it's going to fail silently. And so I want to make it as easy as possible. Yeah, you can do this, but this is a little easier. Now, and again, this can take an array or a set, and it can compare an array to a set or vice versa. And then I did go ahead and add the outputs here. You can see this one, if we want them to be equal and not 0, which generally speaking is the case, it is a little bit more complex. I thought about making this not equal to 0 logic in, but that started to get cumbersome. And then there's a version of this where we build the error in, where you get an error that says, I'm sorry, but these arrays must be equal. But to do that correctly, I'd want to pass in the name of the arrays, because I don't want the error message to say array 1 and array A and array B. I want it to say channel names and channel properties, or whatever the use case is. And so now I'm like, okay, so this is the low opinion part. I want it to be able to tell you the arrays aren't equal. There's no like nuanced opinion there. But if I'm starting to format your error messages and pick your error codes, now it's having a lot more opinion, and now it's less useful because it may not fit in with what you want. Array to set. How many people have written this sub-VI? Yeah, a few. Really simple, array to set. One of the tricks is using a diagram disable to get the default value of a control. And that's going to allow us to create an empty set of that type, and that way an empty array gives us an empty set. If you don't do this, there's a risk that you can get a non-empty set when you pass in an empty array. And now we can do stuff like this, where now I can just convert to arrays, or functionally it's the same thing to build the arrays and then convert it into a set, since I'm going to get unique instances out anyway. All right, I'm going to try to go quick because I'm hoping you got some stuff to go over, and I want to save time for that. Value.keep. This is a one input select. There's a lot of times in code where I want to say either pass out this string or nothing. Either pass out this array or nothing. The array or nothing pattern I use a lot. I might have a function that runs, and if there's an error, I don't want to pass out an array because it may be incomplete or corrupt data. And so I add a little case structure at the end of all those sub-VIs that say if it's an error, and then use the default case structure values to set it. But now I can set it where if the value keep is true, then I'm going to keep the value, and if not, it's going to revert to the default value, again using the diagram disable structure to set that default value. And yeah, this one can be really helpful in a lot of places. Value.default fallback. This is a way to set a default fallback. So again, let's say we were using that thing where we wanted to set the channel name in the property, but sometimes the channel name is empty. If maybe depending on what kind of error it was. And I don't want to just say channel name empty string. I want to say channel name empty channel. And so I can set a fallback value that just, hey, if this value is equal to the default, then here's the fallback I want. Timestamp now if default. How many people have written this sub-VI? A few of us. Diabolically simple. A lot of times I have an input time. If the time is 0, then yeah, let's just pick now. That's better than nothing. All right, we only have 3 left. Inline timer. This is very helpful. This is the cousin to the stall data flow, which allows you to wait for a few milliseconds using a vim. This just puts a high precision timestamp, which lets you do this, and I think it's really nice and clean. I'm now starting to put these inline timers around all my methods that do interesting things that take amount of time, and then I'll put a duration seconds output. It's very useful. I'll wire it into my unit tests, so now my unit tests report how long each function takes. And you can see the code is very simple. Map.keys, map.vim. We saw this in my first example. This is just going to, by virtue of treating a map as just a cluster of two elements, it's either going to index the first element for the key or the second element for the value. So this is two functions in one. It's just depending on which terminal you're indexing there. But yeah, you can get really nice. But this is one of those that can be dangerous if you forget that you're calling this on a map with 10,000 elements and you're like, oh yeah, I'm paying for a for loop there. But usually, I don't have a map of 10,000 elements. Or I'm only doing this if there's an error. And then who cares? It's an error. All right, last one. This is probably the most opinionated and maybe the most polarizing. So this is key value array to map. So often there's a use case where you need to conditionally build a map. In this case, I'm going to spin this loop 100 times. If it's greater than 0.5, I want to include it. If it's not, I don't. Because of the way maps work, I need to use a case structure there. Because of the way maps work, I now need to initialize that. So now I have to have that map constant that maybe I have to keep up to date. And if I change the type in the loop, I have to go back and change the type in the constant or make it a type def. But LabVIEW already has a really great tool for conditionally building an array, indexing with a conditional. And so I'm just going to bundle my key and my value. I'm going to use my default index with an enable, and then I'm going to turn that key value array into a map. So I love this one. Okay, that's everything. You just looked at the whole toolkit. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask for a show of hands on which functions you want to go back and revisit, and then I'm going to open the floor for criticism. Bring it in, bring it in. This is about love. All right, by show of hands, who has some feedback on number one? String array to list. None. Come on, I'd be biting. Number two, array to string list, the Vim version. All right, we got a few hands. All right, number three, string pluralizer. All right, it was a few. Okay, a few. Otherwise, I'm going to assume these are all perfect functions. Error.create custom. Just a few. Error.add info. All right, Darren wants that one. Array.same size. Okay. Array.set. Array to set, number 7. Value.keep, number 8. Value.default fallback, number 9. No takers on that one. Number 10, timestamp now if default. Inline timer, number 11. Got a few. Map.items, number 12, / map.keys. And then finally, number 13, key value array to map. All right, a couple. All right, I think inline timer had the most. So let's start there. If we go to our inline timer. All right, who had some feedback on inline timer? Derek.
Common thing I do a bunch is have the subtraction inside the sub VI, because I'm almost always getting a DT across some operation, and then just make that input optional from previous. So I've got the wire through, the HRS
So now I have an
out,
extra input and an extra output.
And a DT out.
Okay. Who here likes the extra, the built-in math? Who doesn't like it? All right, I'm a little reluctant to add extra terminals. I think the beauty is in the simplicity. And I like the down and to the left for the subtract. That kind of works. And so if you wire it in, now I have to go like up and around my railroad tracks usually.
I always make mine extend below the wire.
Yeah.
So that the pass-through is up top, and in a lot of cases it can fit straight through.
Okay.
But dead code elimination should get rid of it if you're not using it.
Yeah, that's a good case. In a lot of cases, these are VIMs, and so these sub-VIs effectively don't exist at runtime. The code is just merged in with the calling sub-VI, and yeah, dead code elimination would remove that. Okay, great point, Derek. All right, who else had feedback on inline timer?
I like this. It's good.
All right, we got one vote, one upvote. All right, anyone else? Anyone else have a comment?
Kind of like to what Derek said, I've done something similar. I've used a feedback node inside, so that way you don't have to you can get into trouble if you don't,
Yeah.
if you have multiple calls, but.
Yeah, I'm always reluctant to add statefulness unless I'm being really thoughtful. And again, now it's very opinionated. Statefulness makes it opinionated. Chris?
Yeah, just a question for me. I don't use VIMs very often, but your input output up on the diagram, those are error clusters. I mean, I'm assuming those are replaced at runtime with
Correct.
whatever you
So
wire in.
the way a Vim works is effectively you're treating the sub-VI as if it were code on the parent block diagram. And just like if I take on a case structure, if I wire an error into my selector, I get an error case. If I wire a Boolean in, I get a Boolean. And so it takes that error input and just propagates that type. Now, sometimes a Vim will break. There are certain things you can't wire in. If I'm indexing an array and I wire in a 3D array, it might not work. But yeah, in this case, because it's just in to out, I can pass in anything. And yeah, you'll notice the same pattern in the stall data flow, which is the wait version of the same kind of function. All right, any other?
So this is something for just seeing Darren's presentation. With the terminal outputs, the numbers, they're all, like I just noticed across all of them, they're all across the board. Would it make sense to update the terminal block so that those are simpler for everyone who's doing scripting to do these things?
Yeah, great question. So you can tell I have scripting on because it's showing the number. Darren's vigorously shaking his head, so I'm going to take that as a permission to say, no, I don't want to do that. So I rarely break from 4224 icon pattern. Even if I'm making short icons, I try to stick to 4224 because that makes me anxious. Some of these don't have a 4224. I don't know why I picked the third row instead of the fourth. It's because I wanted a bottom output. So some of these are very thoughtful pixel level decisions, and some of them are, I don't know, they just ended up that way. But yeah, I'm hoping there's not, like the scripting case wouldn't be too hard. Yeah, good point though. Derek.
So should there be a sequence structure on that wire? Will it, when that gets inlined into the caller, will it ever potentially put that high resolution seconds?
That might be a question for our LabVIEW friends.
I know a lot of the
Darren's
built-in timing
cringing,
functions.
so maybe he has a point.
So
That,
at
all right.
least a flat sequence structure.
Yeah, we'll call that one a blocker. Thank you, Derek. Yeah, and I just didn't put it in there because I didn't feel like I needed to, but yeah, you're right. If the sub-VI dissolves it edit time, then maybe. All right, let's try to get in.
I can actually answer that.
Yeah.
I'm trying. There. It keeps coming on and off. When that's inlined, it is put into a flat sequence structure. So there will be a flat sequence structure.
Not a blocker. Huzzah. Thank you. That's why I wanted a code review with these guys. All right, we have time for a couple more. I think there was a decent amount on array to string list. Does that sound good? Number 2. All right, anyone have feedback? Aaron.
This is a nit, but thing is misspelled in your text label.
Thank you. Great nit. I will accept that. Tom, are you writing these down? So someone add it to the GitHub so I don't forget about it. Yeah.
Maybe I missed it, but doesn't this do the same thing as the number 1? And why not just eliminate number 1?
So number 1 only works for strings, and it doesn't have the dangers of Vims. For instance, if you wanted to build this into a PPL, or I've had problems where I had a Vim in a Vim, and then it caused the world to explode and my compile times to go crazy. And so at first I only had this version, because this version does everything the first one does, and more. But because I didn't want to carry around the weight of a Vim when 9 times out of 10, I'm just doing the string case. So that's why I made 2. One that's more performant and less risky because it's not a Vim and handles the overwhelming majority of my use case. And another one that makes the weird ones like I need an array of enums a little easier.
Why not just make the second one only for enums, and then you don't have to do Vims at all?
Well, because now what if I want paths? I want an array of paths. Or I want an array of floats. Now, floats are going to format auto with #G, and so they're going to come out with weird. But yeah, paths. Like normally you have to add that extra step to convert the path to the string, and so. Yeah. You couldn't build it for all enums. You need the Vim so that it can adapt to types. All right, Chris.
I might be mistaken here, but the VI that you're basing this on, that's on the palette, the primitive that's like kind of.
So array to spreadsheet string adds a comma at the end of the list, and so you always have to truncate that off. whereas 1D array to delimited string only inserts it between the elements. And so in the case, like I want a commented list, so I don't want a comma after my last element. So yeah, spreadsheet string, I believe, adds that. I have done it where I use spreadsheet string and then like truncate the last 2 characters, but this does
I think
what
it adds
I
a
want.
carriage return line feed is probably what you're thinking,
Yeah.
rather than a comma.
Yeah, and I don't want to presume that. That's opinionated. It's like, I assume you want a carriage. It's like, no.
No, I see that all the time, but I guess my deeper question is the primitives that are in use in this VI that N.I. provided to you. Would it be better to like pull those out, or do you want to? I mean, again, that's maybe more of a performance question. But
Yeah.
I don't know what primitives are in use underneath this, but
Yeah, no, there are some examples. So actually, I'll pivot to a related example in our error function. So if you look for our error.addInfo, if you look at the error, you'll notice the call chain includes the error.createCustom. I don't really want that. I don't want to know that it came from error.createCustom. I want it to come from the caller of error.createCustom. And so in order to do that, I need to go to the call chain and cut one link off. But in order to do that, I have to go into that sub-VI. This is back in the create, this sub-VI here. Now that sub-VI, I can open it, and sure enough, you can see the call chain. And so now it's like, do I want to make my own version of error from cluster so I can, I don't know if I want to do that. Maybe I have to if I want good error messages. And so yeah, when do you take a primitive and like adopt a slightly mutated version into your code for the sake of customization? And I think this is one that I may want to do it because I don't want the error source to be from create custom. Good question. Let's see. Anyone have a burning number they want to get to? We got one over here. Which one do you want to talk about?
Well, I was the last one that you had, the custom.
Yeah.
I have need for warning instead of error.
My official stance on warnings is don't. The IDE is not well optimized for warnings because of things like the case structure handles error no error and error custom error, but there's not a case structure for warning. And so because of that, there are countless tools, drivers that will carelessly drop or overwrite your warnings. So unless you are handling every step of error propagation, I would say do not use warnings and instead use a subset of error codes. But yeah, because case structures don't natively support them, because there are lots of primitives and toolkits that are careless with warnings, I do not recommend warnings. This sub-VI does work for warnings, though, and so does this one. I'm trying not to make the problem worse, but. All right, any other comments? We do have a couple things to review at the end, but we're doing good on time here. So does anyone have another number? Darren, which one did you want to talk about?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Number 5.
Number 5. All right. Error.addInfo. What you got?
I have 3 things to say. First of all, you're 100% right about warnings, so nobody ever use warnings. Second thing, your naming convention with the lowercase and the dots and the dashes, I hate with the fire of 1,000 suns.
Tell me about it. All right, we got some applause. Who here hates this naming convention? All right. I'm feeling the heat. Yep. Tell me why.
Because I like things with words with spaces and capital letters, like I'm reading words with spaces and capital letters.
Yeah.
I'm having to like think and parse and like speak Klingon to figure out what you're doing here. And it's like way harder than reading a normal.
Would you be okay with noun verb if it was, capital E error space add space info?
Yes.
That would be better? All right.
All right.
Who here likes no space? All right, we have maybe some Linux console users. No, that's where it came from. Honestly, when I was at SpaceX, we had a hard rule about because we did a lot of Linux console stuff, and spaces in Linux consoles are annoying. But in LabVIEW, when to begin with everything is in program space files, you're like, okay, all right. I already got to wrap all my paths anyway.
All right, my third piece of feedback is actually for this VI.
Yeah.
Where you're reading the standard error text, bold, complete, call chain, bold. I don't know if that would work in localized LabVIEW because I think those strings are localized in all the other languages, so that might not work. So that's it.
Yeah, I wish that error had more. There was more ways to get into it. And does anyone use the JSON errors? The one Darren was talking about, the preserve all errors. I'm scared of that one because it just makes a mess in that string. All right, I think we got time for like 2 more. Who had naming convention? Yeah.
If you do need to not have spaces, on naming convention, if you do need to have it where you don't have spaces, our company has adopted Pascal case, which is basically every word has a capital, and then we don't have spaces.
Sure. Which is only annoying sometimes when you have a word that is normally all capitalized. Like if I have a visa and I have to write capital V, lowercase I, I'm like, oh, it's...
Well, I guess in our case, we just leave those capitalized.
Yeah.
But then it's a little bit easier to read than the spaces and dash, or than
Yeah.
the dots and dashes.
Fair, fair.
On the array same size.
Yeah.
One of the things that I normally find myself doing is upscaling the smaller array to the larger array size by
Okay.
adding with 0.
Yeah.
And so having a force Boolean input would allow that to be a well-handled case.
Sure. Yeah, I think that would be an extension and definitely make it more opinionated. So I don't think I would want to build it into this version, but I think I could have a second, same size or coerce or something.
Mine was the same idea, that I'm always trying to add a certain number of elements to an array. And so but the default, right? Adding the default value to the array to pad it out to a particular length. And so having a VIM for that would be great. Just, make this array this size, either cut off the end or add more.
Yeah, I've written a 2D version of that where if you had a 2D array and you tried to add something in, it would automatically add rows or columns depending. And so I've written versions of that before and Vim versions too. So yeah, I think that's a great candidate to add to GSugar.
I call it Procrustes because
What do you call it?
Procrustes, he was a classical character.
Nice.
Who cut people's legs off if they were too long and stretched them if they were too short.
All right. We're getting historical there. Yeah, Casey.
This is more of a comment or observation. The ones that you have for the maps, I believe that a lot of that functionality exists already in the collection extensions VI package. I didn't know if you were aware of that and if you
Yeah,
intentionally
I've seen
duplicated them.
some of them, and I know that like I've seen the map to set before. One, it's diabolically simple, so I don't mind it being a little bit of redundant code, and because it exists in one other place, should I not do it? And you're like, but no, I think figuring out the borders around packages is really critical. I know we've all been annoyed before when like, I want to use one function from OpenG and now I have to install 6 libraries. And so you're like, okay, do I make these standalone and maybe they have some overlap? Does everything need to be globally unique? I feel like it's a useful enough and simple enough one that I can include it here and it can be included there and it should be fine. You can use both. But no, fair point. All right, one more, and then we're going to move on to, there's one last little section to review. Any blockers, any nits you're passionate about, but are you willing? Yeah.
The pluralization seems rather English-centric.
Correct. Yeah, I clearly think we've shown that my LabVIEW skills are not well optimized for localization. I don't know enough about how plurals work in other languages. Can you just...
I don't know enough as well, other than I've got people that are non-English language speakers that yell at me whenever I try to stay too English-focused.
Yeah. No, great point. Great point. All right, one more here.
You should check out Ruby's active support for how they do it. They have a pluralize they have a whole inflection table that manages it for you.
Nice. Yeah, if you had a whole dictionary. Norm, you got one?
On the terminal block for the map stuff, for those that don't use auto wire, to make the terminal a wider one across so that the target area for dropping a wire is larger.
Say that again?
For any sub VI that you just have an in and out, instead of making it just that terminal block, you can make it across, right? You're choosing different terminal types on some of these. And so if you choose one that goes all the way across, it's a larger target area for wiring.
So instead of using 4224, you might, like there is just 1, and then your
potentially, you're right.
Wireable area is the maximum size.
But then, exactly. So it's a larger target. Well, it's target on the picture portion.
Yeah.
but it's the largest target possible.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
it's
so I
inits,
agree
but
here.
still.
The only downside is now it makes it, I can't add stuff later. Later, if I wanted to add a Boolean option flag that's non-required, I can't add it because otherwise I have to break the connector pane. But I think in this one, I think the signature of this one is I think we can lock this one down without too much risk. So yeah, great point. All right, I just want to cover a few things, and then if we have time left over, we'll go in. All right, so we looked at the whole toolkit. I think we had some really good nits here. I do want to talk about the last piece of distribution. So for the source code, I've taken all these methods and I put them in an LVlib. The reason I use an LVlib is honestly just for the namespacing. Just in case someone else has made an map.keys, I don't want to conflict it. And so I have it in a gsugar.lvlib, really just for the namespacing. I've recently become a little more reluctant on making LVlibs where they're not really required. These functions aren't related. They're not interdependent. They don't have common dependencies. They're totally unrelated. But you're only ever going to install this as a VI package, so it doesn't matter if they're bundled in an LVlib together. But yeah, I'm just using the LVlib really for namespacing. I'm putting the palette in functions gsugar. I don't know if that's presumptuous to put it into functions rather than into programming or into add-ons or into favorites. So curious if anyone has feedback there. And then using VI Package Manager, that's my main plan to distribute this. I've been working with Tom and trying to see if we can go ahead and move this into the new LV add-ons under C program files non-x86 NI LV add-ons, and found some issues with it picking up the palettes. So for now, I'm just putting it in the normal LabVIEW directories here. And yeah, any thoughts on using an LVlib in this use case, or where to put the palettes, or where to install the VIs? Any strong opinions there? Darren approves. All right, if Darren approves, moving on. One interesting thing that happened here is this is all in Copilot, or this is all in GitHub. And when I made this pull request, it added a little button that said, do you want Copilot to review your code? And I was like, I don't know, let's see what happens. So it doesnit know about LabVIEW, shockingly. But you'll see that it figured out what the overall context was. Now, there was a README. I think that helped. But it could see what was going on, and then it was able to review the 4 text files, the LVlib, the VIPB, and the LVproj, and it found an error in my LVlib. I misspelled error. Thanks for noticing, guys. 3 R's. So yeah, AI spotting LabVIEW errors. It's happening. All right, so the final thing I want to talk about is, what do you think of the context, of the overall idea of syntactic sugar for LabVIEW? Is this something you would want? Do you think the way I've defined the scope and purpose of this is correct? Should this exist? Is this a bad idea and I should just use existing stuff, or I should recode this? Or, and then the one question I do want to ask, who here would download this? Got a few? So this will be available as a VI package very soon. I'm on vacation next week, so I'm not shipping it yet, and it sounds like I have a few things to fix. The GitHub is available now. You can go download any of these VIs. It's all MIT licensed. So if you think all of these are garbage except for one, download that one function, throw it in your repo, have fun. So yeah, any final comments on just the overall idea of syntactic sugar for LabVIEW and the scope and design of what I tried to create here? Questions?
Not a question, but just some of a comment from earlier in the code review. Like, I think some of these could use just some block diagram comments, right? I mean, just in general, just a reminder to yourself in the future, a reminder to people maybe looking at this and adding, because I could see this as a repo that somebody would say, hey, I want to add a couple of things, right? Or I want to,
Yeah, I don't have a lot of comments. I only had a few. Like, so this one, using a diagram disable structure to get a default value. I'm being clever. If you're being clever, you got to leave a note. But you're like, this one, you're like, is there anything worth explaining?
No.
Well, or even, you'll notice the VI descriptions. I'm pretty minimal in my VI descriptions. I don't make VI descriptions for VIs I make. I only make VI descriptions for things I want other people to be able to use easily. And so I've added these, but they're all I'm not going in deep on that. And yeah, so yeah, I go through the PR, and if you can find a VI that I generally add comments. Yeah, I have one comment here. But yeah, not a whole lot. Yeah, yeah, Vims are a different
Like maybe a
curve.
couple of comments in there about.
If you're new to Vims, I highly recommend Tom and Nathan last year at GDevCon Europe did a introduction to Vims. It's on YouTube. Check that one out.
I like the concept a lot. I think, like how property nodes, you could do no name, short name, long name. It'd be nice if there's some of the functions that you kind of just made smaller, if you could just right click on it and maybe do like a sugar version.
I think we'd need some editor support for that, or potentially later today I'll tell you more about JCrawler, our static analysis tool. JCrawler could definitely find instances that could be replaced. It can go find 1D strings and suggest that. All right, my time is showing up here. I think I have just a couple minutes, so cool. GSugar approved. I'm going to go ahead and add this line to my source documents. This has been personally reviewed by Eric Reffett. Okay, so what's next? So I do want to release version 1 of GSugar probably in 2 weeks. I'm going to be on vacation next week, and I'm not going to try to release this from the plane on the way home. I do want to incorporate feedback. We've captured a lot of the stuff we've talked about here. I think you guys came up with some good stuff. And feel free to go on the GitHub. By the way, if you're on the GitHub and you use dark mode, you'll find that all the screenshots are unusable because I did Control-A, Control-C from PowerPoint, which makes transparent PNGs. And I have white mode, so I didn't notice. My goal is to grow GSugar by about 2 to 2.5. Right now we have 14 functions. I think 25-ish sounds like a nice full palette. I don't think it needs to be 50. I think 25's scopable. Some of the ideas I have, so array.diff, where you wire in 2 arrays and you get elements only in 1, elements only in 2, elements that are common. I have an implementation of that I don't love. That's why it didn't make the first cut. I want error handling for common functions like map lookup. I want map lookup with error, where now if it's not found, it'll say key, blah, 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 not found. And that way I don't have to do map lookup, giant case structure, put the stuff I want in 1, put custom error handling I have to rewrite every time in the false. I just want to call lookup and map and get a normal error out. But if I have errors, I'm going to have opinions on error codes and wiring. Search 1D array with error, same thing. Error.print. If you want to just get a text representation of an error, you can use the dialog function and choose the no dialog option, but that's not supported in RT, and it doesn't give options. So I have a VI that you can get an error, and you can say, do you want the call chain, do you want the message, do you want the code, and you'll get out a nice little string. And then, Tom had suggested I had a snippet for error.createCustom that drops with a format to string included. Finally, I don't know if I need examples or documentation or, I have a basic README. I feel like this is all really simple, primitive stuff. Maybe a good primer on Vims to make it more accessible. So yeah, if you have suggestions on what I can add around this, this is not a huge investment project. This is a fun little thing, and I hope that I can share it with you guys. There's also a GitHub discussion for suggestions for new ideas. And so if you have a VI that you use in your repos or your palettes that you find sweetens your syntax just a little bit, and you don't mind sharing it, I'd welcome contributions here. And as I said, everything in the end, it's all open source, so if you just want to go steal one of these right now, you're welcome to it. That's all I got. Let me know if you have any other questions. I'll be around, and you'll be hearing from me later this afternoon. Thank you.